So,
Anybody else? So, I wanted to share a story. This has become really important to me because I've been really aware, as I'm sure all of you are, about the division that is happening in our country, right? There's just so much division. And so much of that division that occurs in social media, whether Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, whatever it is that you're on, the platform that you're on, I'm sure that you see it. And so this kind of has come up for me because of that. And I've heard people say, oh, I don't even get involved in those kinds of dialogues because you can't change anybody's mind anyways. And I took that idea that you can't change anybody's mind and I really thought about that. And I thought, well, is that true? Well, it is true if I think that I'm going to get into a conversation with you and I'm going to change your mind. But what I realized was a mind could change and that could be my mind. And in the process, I may not end up agreeing with you at the end, but I may have more understanding of you, have more understanding of where you're coming from. So I go into all these conversations with people from the perspective that absolutely a mind can be changed. My mind can be changed. And so that's how I enter into these conversations. So that's kind of the basis for the story that I wanted to share with you tonight. So I was not interacting in this Facebook post, but I was watching a Facebook post, and it was about generalities and stereotyping and liberals are this and conservatives are that. And those kind of generalizations, those memes, do nothing but divide, right? They do nothing but divide. And the interesting piece to me is always that, the one who's in the worst light in that situation will come back and say, I don't see myself in that, And so it's just very interesting how those generalizations work. So anyways, there was this generalization about that, and I was just kind of watching, reading along the comments that were coming up around it. And it very quickly devolved into name calling and all of these other things. And somehow, in the process of this, the conversation turned to plastic bags. And I know, right? Really? Yes. And so I know the person who was making the comments. I don't know this person very well, but indirectly I know who they are. I know they live out in California. And of course, California, lots of progressive laws. I think they were one of the first ones to ban plastic bags, plastic bag bans. And so this person was coming back with, I love plastic bags. I love plastic bags. I use them whenever I can, as many as I need. I love plastic bags. And this person is younger, like 30s, and I know them to have young children. And I'm thinking in my head, like, what? I mean, how do you even say that? Don't you see the impact that plastic bags are having on our earth, So, but it sat with me, like, so what's behind that comment? How can you make that kind of a comment? There must be something behind it. So I decided to do a Google search, because that's how we find all our answers. Type in plastic bags in environment. Well, the first things that came up would have all supported my confirmation bias, right? They were all the articles about the evils of plastic bags and why they need to be illegal and why we shouldn't use them. And so when you're doing Google searches, the interesting thing is, like, the first couple of pages, you'll find that you keep coming across articles that will confirm whatever you believe. So I've learned to keep going. And so it was probably 4 or 5 pages into this Google search that suddenly this article popped up about plastic bags. And what I learned was that on the production side of plastic bags are actually the least impactful on the environment. They're very simple and cheap to make, and they don't have a lot of environmental impact. Now, after production, they clearly do have an environmental impact. When we just throw them out, we see the images around the globe of, like, the plastic bags floating through the ocean, and then the fish think that it's another fish and they go to eat it, or the whales that are opened up and they're filled with plastic and that. So we know that there is absolutely an environmental impact after production, but production-wise, plastic bags are the least impactful on our environment. Paper bags or the cotton bags, like the mesh bags that you see advertised a lot, those are the most impactful on the environment on the production end. They cause a lot of damage to our environment. So it's like, oh, that's interesting. So this article, what it suggested was The best thing that we can do if we get these plastic bags is simply upcycle them. Use them in your garbage can. Now you're not buying additional plastic bags to throw away into the landfill, right? You've already got this plastic bag that you picked up at the grocery store, and so use that to throw away your garbage. And of course, one of the best ways is to buy the reusable plastic bags, right? I've got some I've been using for 10 years, so that's probably the best way to do it. But this idea that we hear that, oh, we need to get rid of all plastic bags, I changed my mind on it. And I changed my mind because of the research that I did and my willingness to move beyond my own bias and my own confirmation bias to see a different side. And so I kind of got off the bandwagon of, no, we need to ban all plastic bags. We need to be responsible earthlings and do the right thing. But making laws to specifically ban plastic bags, I'm not so convinced that that's the right thing to do anymore. So I share this as an example of how I allowed myself to move beyond what I thought I believed about something, to understand somebody else and where they might be coming from. And in the process, my mind was changed. And I see, Joanne, that you have a comment or...
I just wondered what I would do when I clean that litter box for my cats if I didn't have plastic bags.
Right, and so it's okay to take a plastic bag at the grocery store and then to reuse it to clean out your litter box for your cats. That's the best way to do it, because otherwise you have to buy another plastic bag, and that doesn't make sense either. Right?
So Joanne, in the general case then, this is a great specific example,
Yeah.
but now having experienced this, having your mind turned 180 degrees from where you were before, in the general case, how will you proceed when you encounter another topic, and then the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one? Person can drive themselves crazy.
Oh.
You can't be constantly doing 6 and 7 page deep Google searches to figure out what's right.
And that is absolutely the case. And in fact, but the other side of it, Greg, is, so I'm sure we've all heard, about Russia interfering, and what they're specifically wanting to do is to create this propaganda campaign, to create discord in our society, to get us arguing with one another. And one of the things that they're, in those propaganda campaigns, that they're counting on is that we get tired of doing that very thing, that we get tired of looking and researching and finding out the facts, and in the process give up and say, you know what, this is just way too hard. I'm not going to do this anymore. And then guess what? They've won, So I think we have to balance it. Like, I can't drive myself crazy constantly researching. But I tell you what, I have read more Senate reports and House reports, than I ever would imagine that I would do in my lifetime, just because I want to be informed and I don't want my confirmation biases to get in my way. So I'm willing to do the research.
I feel like 95% of what I perceive as my issues are interpersonal. Like Kathy said, just stopping, thinking, why do I feel this way about a certain person, and then backing up and doing internal work.
Yeah.
So that's not a Google search, that's just like a Kate search or whatever it would be called, for you.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's more going inside.
Right.
Than it is having to do like hours of research, I guess. Yeah.
Absolutely. In that particular case, what you've done, or even me and the recognition that my mind could be changed, that is just introspection, that is just self-awareness, that is just unity, because that is what unity is about, becoming self-aware, self-responsible, and so yes, constantly checking in. But I find, Greg, when you ask that question, if my button is really getting pushed on something, it's kind of an area that I need to take a look at and see what is the truth, what are the facts.
It feels different.
Yes, yeah. So Christy, I see your hand up. I'm going to bring you the microphone.
Is it? Okay. I want to talk about bags more.
It's not intended to be
No.
a bag conversation, but yes, go ahead.
Another thing on that as well is I have also learned that the bottles, the plastic bottles, it takes more energy to recycle them and transporting them and cleaning them, and but I wanted to make another comment is a lot of our bias come from our childhood and the things that we have experienced through our childhood, especially at young ages, because, and our counselor can confirm this, I think it's up to the age of 5 or 7 where we are mostly impressioned in our lives, and if things happen to us at those early ages, we will forever have a bias unless we address those things. And not only that, but the trauma that happens in our lives, even car accidents, there's a long list of things that can create bias.
Thank you, Christy. Yeah, will you tell us your name, because I don't know your name?
I'm Lindsay. And I wanted to touch on what you said about changing other people's minds versus changing our own. I've never really thought about that. I recently got engaged, and we're coming up against family's interactions of how we're going to have our wedding, and then my fiance is super nervous about kids and everything that we've talked about before, but it seems to be on his chest really hard right now. And I'm like, well, this is how it's going to be. This is the way I grew up. I'm fine. This is the way that it should be. And instead of it's not going to work if I try to change his mind to my side, but to maybe change mine and to be more open to those types of things, that really struck me, because it's usually me always trying to make sure everyone agrees with me instead of the other way around. So that was very helpful.
Lindsay, and congratulations. You got a whole lifetime now to, work on this, right? Anybody who's married knows that, right? Yeah, anybody else want to share? So this is, there's probably some kind of a bias here, Greg, but I just want to share about the plastic one more thing. And that is, plastic is nothing more than a byproduct of our petroleum, correct? So why do we have plastic? It's actually, there's a byproduct. We have to use that byproduct. It's cheap, and so we have created plastic. So if those of us who are so sure that we need to eliminate plastic, we need to start thinking about, well, what am I doing to support petroleum usage? When do I just don't even give a second thought? I got to run to the store and jump in my car and drive to the store, and I don't even think anything about it. So it's all just so complex and interrelated, and so that's what I'm also aware of, is it's not just like this, and this is where I'm sure there's a bias, like this one simple answer, and that there's not complexity to it. We come down to just this, and then that's where we stop. So, Karen. You've got an earpiece, yeah?
I'm Karen Tomoff, and I'm a clinical counselor in private practice in Rocky River. And I want to talk a little bit about the brain. And if you're like me, and it's like, oh no. So that was my bias, but I actually have found this helpful. So hopefully you can see there's a stimulus. Let's say it's this stage. It goes into the thalamus, which is the traffic cop of the brain. So I'm going to try and simplify this. Because for most of us, it's not emotional. It goes into 3 synapses down into the neocortex. That's our computer part of our brain where 2 + 2 is 4. Unless you have speaking anxiety, which I have, it then goes in 1 synapse into the amygdala. That's the primitive part of the brain. And so when the amygdala gets stimulated high enough, it will land here before the neocortex. When this gets stimulated strong enough to like a 6 or a 7 out of 10, adrenaline gets released, which is that fight or flight. Your heart starts going, your body is, going with energy so that you can run away from the lion that Greg was talking about. And when it's high enough, catecholamines, which are some neurotransmitters, get released, and it blocks your access to the neocortex. So when you get really angry, that's why you say things that you go, now why did I say that? I can't believe I said that. That's why. And it has a protective process, because if a lion is after me and I stop to think, how fast can I run and how fast can that lion run, I've lost important time and energy in dealing with it. And so that's really important, not only for us, but to realize when you see other people getting upset to that 6 or 7 out of 10, they're in their amygdala. But all isn't lost. what we can do is learn to practice our skills when this gets stimulated to cope. And so you can bet in the Super Bowl and when, basketball in their championships, they're in their amygdala. But they have practiced over and over how not to respond if the ref makes a poor call. Because you can bet they feel like hitting them one, or somebody starts taunting them. They've been taught over and over by their coaches, by all their fouls and things, not to do that. So we can practice our skills, but we have to practice them when you're rooted in that experience. And so what that's meant for me is when I see the stage and I'm coming up, I start practicing and rooting and breathing and talking to myself so that over time, my distress about that has gone down. And so what my hypothesis to you is watch when you're getting distressed. And is there an unconscious bias that's associated? And then here's the joke of the talk. This is not a college for hippos. The hippocampus is a part of the brain that takes things from the amygdala and it becomes like an Etch-a-Sketch. As you calm down, it takes it and it kind of, shakes them all up, and then they can get lodged in the neocortex. So when I was a kid, I was afraid that there were trolls under my bed. And if I had to get up to go to the bathroom, I had to jump way out so they wouldn't get me. I don't think that anymore. Thank goodness my hippocampus has, and my amygdala have readjusted, and it's in my neocortex, and I'm not worried about that anymore. Any questions about this?
So, Karen, you said the way that we can learn to overcome it is practicing while we're in the experience.
While we're in the state. Now, a 10 out of 10 is hard, so for me, coming up to the stage, I started when I was back there. And so when I was at a 7, I was much more able. And then as I got closer, I'd get to an 8, and I could continue to calm down.
Right. Now, in your example, it was one person. What if you're in a heated discussion with your spouse? How do you do that then?
Well, after 37 years, we've had lots of practice. There have been lots of heated exchanges. I used things years ago, but there's something that we brought a training to Unity on something called HeartMath that I have found really helpful. So here's my brain when I'm relaxed. Here's my brain when I'm stressed. Here's my brain and my breath and my heart rate when I'm relaxed. Here it is when I'm stressed. So when cognitive behavior therapy started, cognition was king. Change how you think, and you're going to change how you feel and how you act. Well, this place out in California called HeartMath did the research, and what they've discovered is that when we focus on this place, not the heart muscle, but the heart space, and we breathe up and down through here, it's 50 times stronger than when we come from here. And so learning when I'm...
Stronger, what do you mean stronger?
The impulses that go, the messages, the ability to change is 50 times stronger from here.
Okay, and that was measured with like ECGs or something?
I don't know how they measured it. But they do have they have something called inner balance where it goes on the ear, and it will show the heart rate variability, and it can give, it's like a little biofeedback, and will show when you're in this place versus when you're in this. And
so in the example, you're having a discussion with your spouse.
yes,
And
he's wrong.
Right. Right. You get to the point where you're about to say that thing that you'll regret later.
Yes.
How do you recognize that it's coming? Because if you knew it was coming, you wouldn't say it.
So I've practiced, and with the folks that I work with, I have them practice putting a number to what they're experiencing. And John Gottman is a couples therapist, and he has researched couples. And so he's put them in an apartment for a week at a time, filmed every interaction, bless those people, and he's had his grad students tick off the different kinds of communication. And now he can do this, I can't. When he sits with a new couple for 2 minutes with 93% accuracy, he can tell if they're going to stay together or not.
Wow.
That's amazing. And so he has a number of great books. It's John Gottman. One of them is the 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. Is that on that 0 to 10 scale, if you're at a 7 or above, what's going to happen is not going to be helpful. So I've learned to watch for me, and it's like, I need a break, as well as when I see him going, I think we need a break. And so we take that until we're 6 or below, and we come back. And when couples often, and family members often need to practice that, because it's a higher degree of violence when somebody is saying, I need a break, and the other person says, no, we're going to resolve this now, and they follow them and chase them around. That's when violence happens. So learning to take that break is really, really important.
Has to be bilateral, though.
Yes, and so often agreed in advance. And for couples that struggle with this, and Alex and I did at times, it was practicing it when we were at a 4 or a 5. And either one of us could say, I think we need to take a break. And it's like, but I think we need to take a break.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
You know, I was going to say to your question too, Greg, it's practicing self-awareness, like practicing self-awareness all the time, so that when you get into those moments where the emotions are high, you've already practiced it. You're already aware of how you show up in different situations, and then I think you'll catch yourself way sooner. You'll catch yourself at that 6, or hopefully before you get to that 7, you know.
Yes.
But I think it takes practice all the time. It takes being willing to see how you're responding and how you're reacting and how attached you are to being right and all of
Right.
those different things, you know.
Right. There's an old saying that says, people who think they know everything are very annoying to those of us who do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Karen, you want me to?
I
So,
was also gonna say that, it's not, like if I'm fighting, if Shane and I are fighting, right, how nice that she's sitting there that I can say that. It's not that I'm sitting there thinking that I'm right, it's that I wanna keep going because I want to heal this fight. I don't want us to be fighting anymore, like, I want her to love me and care about me, like, I want the conflict to be over.
Right.
I want to end it, we go back to normal and we're fine. So to me, that means not walking away. But then, when we're at that 7, it's like, oh my gosh, nothing good is getting done.
Right.
So I was just thinking, like, maybe we could literally make little permission slips of, like,
yes.
I give myself permission and you permission to, like, walk away. Like, it sounds silly, but in terms of training ourselves to do it.
And what's critical is who's ever saying they need a break is to say when they'll come back.
Yeah.
Because like if Alex is needing a break and he doesn't tell me when he's coming back, it's like, is it an hour? Is it a day? Is it a week? And then I get filled with anxiety. So whoever says they need the break, and I'll be back in an hour, or I'll be back in a day. And then to be sure, and then if after an hour it's like I need another hour, okay, but at least come back, and that takes practice too.
And is it like, come back and we'll talk then when we've both calmed down? So it's not just like, walk away, we never talk about it again, right?
Right.
It's like, talk when you're calm.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, and it can take many chapters, yeah. So this that Greg is handing out, those of you who are familiar with cognitive behavior therapy will know this. So it's the 10 common thinking errors that lead to anxiety and depression. This handout just said anxiety. And David Burns is the professional who came up with this, and he himself has struggled with anxiety and depression, so he shows it well, or knows it well. So I'm just going to highlight a couple of them. And these are great to watch TV on and to watch, because you'll hear the catastrophization. Like, oh, wasn't it just horrible when he said this? It was awful. I couldn't stand it. Those three phrases, it's awful, it's horrible, I can't stand it, are going to ratchet up anxiety. So I think of it like yellow journalism. And so it's going to get that distress level up to a 7 or above, and I'm going to have a hard time calming down, and I'm going to keep ruminating and recycling. And so in this practice then, it's rephrasing it. Here's the second part of my little chart. So this comes from dialectical behavior therapy. We have emotional mind, happy, sad, angry, scared. Rational mind, where 2 + 2 is 4. Now, in standard dialectical behavior therapy, where this comes from, it's just these two. And we try not to go too far to either side, because if I'm really happy, I'm going to do some things like spend some money that I'm going to regret later. And rationally, I don't want to do my taxes, so I'm just going to sit down and plow through it and get it all done in one sitting, ignoring whether I'm tired or hungry or hangry. I'm going to make errors. So the idea is to put a foot in both circles and to try to come from wise mind. And in unity, we add a spiritual place, and so it's the intersection of all three. And so when we can get into that heart math place and commune with our divinity and with the divine and look at what is wise. And so with catastrophization, it's like I'm really unhappy or I'm very angry and upset that that happened. Doesn't mean that it's awful. I would reframe it as challenging or very, very challenging. I'm not asking you to sugarcoat it, but to try it and put it in terms that will be wise to help you look at how am I going to work through this. With I can't stand it, I'm not likely to try to work through it.
Karen, what does one do when they become addicted to that adrenaline rush? I know I've seen people that turn on the channel that they don't like because they love yelling at the screen. That's a thing.
Yes.
And it's like they've just run a mile at full steam.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you not get into that habit?
Well, if it's somebody else, I'm not going to change them. If it's me, like I found that I can be addicted to stress and to being too busy, and caffeine helps me with that. So I currently consume very little caffeine and try to do lots of meditation and mindfulness to try to be operating here more. And as I age, that's really important for my health.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
yeah. So I'm going to highlight just two more. One of them is third from the bottom on the distortions, emotional reasoning. You assume that your negative emotions necessarily reflect the way things really are. I feel it, therefore it must be true. So Kathy, with your example, I don't like that woman, so it must be true that she's not likable. And so watching for that and slowing it down and doing the checking you were thinking about.
I would also just call that like, AKA my 20s, like, do you know what I mean? When you like, you don't know any better, you
Right.
just think like, I am my feelings, when
But
you,
Right.
you don't have that healthy distance.
And it also brings in stereotyping.
Yeah.
You know, this group of people over here, I've already made up my mind about them, and therefore it must be true.
I have a question, not only with age, but I was going to ask about hormones because I'm 46 and, you know, going into that premenopausal stuff, I've had some trouble differentiating sometimes, like the emotional, rational, I'm way over here and over here at the same time.
Yes.
And sometimes I'm not in that middle very
Right.
often.
Right.
And I'm wondering how much the hormones change that, not only at my age, but throughout our
Yes.
lives.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes, it certainly plays a part. And so there's a skill in dialectical behavior therapy called radical acceptance. And it's accepting things the way they are. And, you know, I really learned to practice that when my 2-year-old nephew got leukemia. It's like, no, he didn't do anything. Well, of course not. Leukemia isn't caused by doing something wrong. It was one of my biases. And so I had to keep turning my mind back to, and this still is what is. So as I've gone through the change, this is still what is. The third step is called willingness. And in willingness, it's what's going to be effective. I'm at 7 or above, maybe it's due to my hormones. So what do I do to help bring myself down? And it's a part of willingness to be open to the universe. It's like, I don't know how to solve this. So universe, divinity, help me out. Help me to know who to talk to, what to read, what dream to have, so that the pieces begin to fall in. Again, focusing on what's going to be effective. And the opposite of that is something, Marshall Lenehan was the one who created this. It's called willfulness. Fine, I won't do anything then. Notice the sass that's a part of it. Or, fine, I'll just do it all myself. Either one of those is way out of balance. So we all get to that willfulness. It's realizing it. For me, it's labeling it and then choosing, I'm going to try not to do much. Because if I do something from there, it's not going to go well, and I'm going to get negative repercussions. I can have a real hot head and say some things that don't go over well, and other people heard about.
It's nice to know that therapists have that too. Or like
Oh,
when Joan's
yeah.
like, oh, you know, I take
Yeah.
a drink or whatever. It's like, you're just like us.
Yes, yes. Yeah, when I go to a party, sometimes I make up what my career is. Because people assume that I'm psychoanalyzing them. It's like, no, I get enough of that. I don't want to do that here. So the last one I want to highlight is should statements. We use should a lot in our culture, and shoulds bring shame. So maybe I should go home and clean my room, or there should be no war and people should be fair. But the more I should, the more upset I get, and it doesn't really change what's happening around me. So it's reframing that instead of, I should do this. It's like, I want to go clean my room. No, I don't. I need to go clean my room. That one fits. And I'm going to have more energy in my body than if I should on myself. And if you should on other people, it's likely to bring shame and guilt, and they're likely to be more resistive. So I don't know if you have teens, but if you tell them you should be home by curfew, you should stop bossing me around, is what they'll come back with. So I might say it's your responsibility to be home by curfew. So any of these things, if you see them happening and you see what to do at the bottom, know the pattern, recognize it, and then challenge your thinking and be with your feeling and try to think of what's going to be more effective here. And if you need some assistance with that, look for a cognitive behavior therapist. I can't believe as a Gestalt therapist I'm saying that. They would disown me. Or a dialectical behavior therapist, or a unity therapist.
I'm just thinking about how so much of it comes to awareness, right? It really is about awareness, and that even in Unity, when we talk about these spiritual ideas and these spiritual practices, it just keeps coming down to awareness for me. So I think the more that we can become aware of how we show up and the way we think and how we react, the more opportunity we have then to overcome our biases. And I think willingness is the biggest thing, instead of just digging in your heels and saying, no, this is the way it is, to be willing to come to it from a different approach, to have your mind changed, as I shared earlier.
Yeah. Do you think that a way to build that awareness is to practice meditation? Like one of our Unity principles is prayer and meditation, but and man, I took that meditation class with you, and I was like, I'm meditating every day, and then all of a sudden I realized I'm
not meditating.
Right? I don't know the last time I did it, and do you think it's that it builds that space inside of your brain, like to give you that pause when you're, before
Yeah.
you say the thing?
Yeah.
Like, does meditation literally
And if I could just say about that, Kate, because a lot of people have this idea of what meditation should be, and what I have found is that mostly what happens isn't when you're sitting on the meditation cushion, if you will. It happens as a result of just practicing it regularly, consistently, over and over again, and it's when you get off the pillow and you go about your day that you then begin to experience the impact of meditation. Yeah, because I think you've said it, it's that training your brain to give yourself that space for a new response to come. Yeah.
There's a specific kind of meditation that I found helpful in this area, and it was developed by someone by the name of Shinsen Young, and he talks about dividing and conquering. So he divides our experience into our thoughts, our feelings, our images, and our sensations. And so to take one of those a day, so like today might be thought, so I'm either going to label out loud thought or quiet for 5 minutes, whatever comes. And at a gentle pace, because if I'm going thought, that's going to get pretty tiring. So it's like thought, And then actually comes some absence of thought for a little bit, quiet. And so by practicing the next day, it might be feel and peace. By doing that 5 minutes a day, then when life is happening, I can pick from any of the 8 spaces. And instead of it coming all around me, I'm back and behind, and I'm going, oh, thought, oh, those are unconscious biases, thought, feel. And then I can choose more of what I want to invest in instead of being run by whatever just is happening here that happens more automatically.
Yeah, Joy.
I have a hard time, I have a sister who's probably the best-hearted person alive, but every time you say something, she snaps at you. It's never just calmly. And I don't know how to react. I don't want to react the same way. So I don't know what to practice ahead of time, so I don't jump back at her.
Well, I have some thoughts, and then someone in the audience does too. I wonder, I have a daughter like that. She gave me lots of practice, and so it was dropping in and going calm, calm, calm. And so if I focused on grounding in me, things went better. And sometimes, as a daughter instead of a sister, I'd say, I hurt when I'm talked to in that way. And then she'd go, well, you're just too sensitive. I hurt when I'm talked to in this way. And my back in leaving, I was trying to bless her, I was doing it, but the walking away, because if I stayed and was there, she would keep criticizing and putting me down, as a 16-year-old teen is going to do for their mom. So I didn't stay and water those weeds. I blessed her and walked away and came back when we were both calmer.
And I think the challenge in that, Joanne, is that we have to move out of the idea that I've got to change this person, right? That's not your responsibility. Just how am I going to show up in this? And so I really like the example you gave. Do you have something to share about this, Christy?
I have a daughter who is very snappy, and she realizes it, but I think sometimes it's just a person's excitement about something. We don't know, because even when I have conversation with somebody and we're excited about that conversation, we're almost not yelling at each other, but our voices are raised. And it's because of the excitement and passion behind what we're talking about. Now, that's not the case all the time, but you don't know what that person's experiencing. But on the other hand, too, I was talking to somebody earlier today. Why are we responding that way? Is it something that happened to us in our lifetime, like a parent that was yelling at us? Or, it could have been anybody in how you're reacting to that person. So also, I look inside me, why am I thinking that way?
I wanted to share a story going back to what Greg said in the beginning about what he called false memories. I'm trained in something called eye movement desensitization reprocessing. Yes. What we found is when trauma occurs, it gets locked in the nervous system with the original picture, sounds, thoughts, and feelings. And when you're with a skilled practitioner and you're focusing on the trauma and your eyes move back and forth, it can help your system to release the experience, process it, and move it from that amygdala to the hippocampus and down into the neocortex. So in the training I went to, they talked about a man who could talk about what happened during the Holocaust with vivid detail and would get really upset every time it happened. The challenge was he was too young to have lived through it. And what they found is in doing EMDR with him, that his parents and grandparents had lived through it. And when he was young, they were talking about it at the kitchen table, and he was under the table. They didn't realize he was under there, and he took in. And there's something called mirror neurons, that when we're with people, our neurons can begin to mirror someone else, and we can get it housed in the amygdala from that. And so with EMDR, in what came through for him and what we've learned is what you're re-experiencing may not be factually accurate, and that's not what's important. It's how you carry it that's important, and what you do to release it and make meaning and heal and become resilient.
So who's gonna sign up for like Karen's EMDR? Thank you.
Too bad we couldn't do it as a group. Follow.
Questions? Stories? As you're talking about the brain, Karen, I'm and kind of your lion story there, Greg, I'm remembering there's a book called Buddha's Brain. It's a great book about the brain, although it gets really detailed into stuff like this. But they talk about in that book our brain's bias towards negativity, that we have a bias towards negativity. And just like the lion story, it was there evolutionarily because it kept us safe. Like, we had to be on the lookout for things that might hurt us or harm us. And so that negativity bias is there within all of us. And Buddha's brain talks about we can overcome it. You know, we are not stuck with that bias. We can overcome that bias. So some of these ideas that you're sharing with us, Karen, are helpful to help us to overcome some of these ways that our brain just automatically is programmed. It's designed that way. And just like these biases, designed that way to keep us safe. So I was thinking about that as you were both sharing, both the brain and the lion.
And there's two quick things similar to that. It's called gladdening the mind. So that
Sorry, I didn't hear it.
it's called gladdening the mind.
Gladdening the mind.
And so when you're seeing a beautiful sunset or you have a beautiful meal in front of you, it's really focusing and like a sponge, it's like spending time and really helping it to soak all the way through to help overcome some of that. And the practice of gratitude. And then there's one that's come down from the Buddhist monks, and they kept it secret for a long time. It's called the half smile. So if you'll try it with me, just check inside with your inner environment and then try just a half smile and see if you feel any change. Does anybody notice anything different?
Well, your facial muscles relax.
Yes.
And that's key, because I sometimes have headaches because these muscles here get
Right.
tense, and it's eye strain, I'm
Right.
sure, at least part of it. But smiling does help relax all those muscles.
Yes. Yeah, I try to practice it when I go in shopping so that I'm always walking through the aisle, dealing with the clerks. Even if I'm grumpy inside, it's like,
I was moved by when you talked about breathing from your heart center.
yes.
And it's like, as soon as you were talking about that, I felt myself do the breath.
Yeah.
And I like instantly felt better.
Yes.
It's funny how you don't even realize that you're holding your breath or that you're tensing your face
Right.
unless you bring your awareness to it. So like you said, it really does all go back to awareness.
And there's a tool called the Heart Wisdom tool that they taught us in the training. And so that is, even if I'm upset, I can bring those feelings of distress up and down through the heart space and ask, what is a more effective response? Sometimes it comes within minutes, sometimes not for a day or two, but it's a neat way to help transform it.
I just had a comment. Someone going up with a lot of anxiety, fight and flight, PTSD, that it was, all of this was so helpful to me to know how my brain was working, and I'm in my brainstem, and I can't even think.
Right.
Know all this about myself, and to be able to, and to take a break and either do my heart math, which is so helpful, or even a, deep breathing, cleansing, all these
Yes.
tools, or actually to just talk to myself and say, I have 80 to 90,000 thoughts a day. They're always repetitive, and almost half of them aren't even true. And just these
Yes.
basic things of telling myself, or someone reacting like your sister, I have to stop and say, her reaction probably doesn't even have anything to do with me. She's rawr, and I'm like, it has nothing to do with me.
Right.
So I used to spend a lot of time in my mind to reverse this and know that I have stress responses, my body craves it. And knowing all this, just to step back from all this, has been extremely helpful to even stand here with a microphone. That's all.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, Shannon.
I do a lot of work with my people. I'm a therapist also. As far as like the communications and that kind of stuff, is to try to teach them the art of pause, which means that before you speak, just take that split second and say, are you reacting or are you responding to it? And when they're getting into that, I have a few breathing techniques that I teach them. And I have them practice them all the time so they can become an automatic go-to when they start to feel themselves getting up there. And then as far as the unconscious bias is, I teach them active listening, where they're truly being mindfully focused on perceiving what that person is saying, not thinking about what they're going to say instead, not truly listening to what other people are saying, and then that makes their communication more effective going back when they do respond versus react. And then to say things in a way that the other person will listen to them. Because when even when you're upset, if you're screaming at them, they will not hear you. So if you truly want to get your message across, how are you presenting that to them? And you can do that if they stay in that lower calm part, so.
I really like that, the difference between reacting and responding.
I think one of the questions I like to ask to help me to listen and to overcome my biases when I'm knowing that I might be there is that question of help me to understand. Help me to understand why you believe that way. Help me to understand. And then to really listen, right? Not just to do that, but to really listen and allow myself to shift in that listening. So that is so key too, the listening piece of it, right? Because we so often listen to respond rather than listen to listen. Yeah,
People do not like to be wrong.
people
That's-
do,
They
right.
just don't. Right. And when we are shown to be wrong and we know we're wrong, often we double down and dig our heels in, and that makes it 10 times worse.
Yeah.
Like the Fonz. I was
Yeah.
wrong.
Anybody else have a comment or question or story of bias to share with us? Yeah, Lisa.
Well, I'm trying to make it as short as possible, but for years now, I haven't gone to visit my father who lives in the mountains of North Carolina because we have such different views on things. And when I'm in his house, it's his way or the highway kind of thing. And he wears one of those red hats that I immediately think of all the things that we just don't, we have to agree to not talk about so many things. His living conditions don't, I disagree with his living conditions, so the whole time I visit, I'm always there to change it. And just hearing all of this, I mean, I have already made plans to go see him in March, and I'm just keeping in my mind, you know, this time it's going to be different. I'm not going to judge. I'm going to go have fun. I'm not going to change things. But I had no idea that I was going to get so much out of this that I could use when I go there. So this was amazing timing. Thank you so much.
It's a good
I'm glad.
testimonial.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And that's that generalization that we do. We think we know what somebody is because of, I don't know, the clothes they're wearing, the hat they're wearing, the way they show up, the way they look.
It's also that, you know, you want his living conditions to be different because you care about him, right? Like so many of the disagreements that I have with my family, it's because I care about them, which is so frustrating.
It's
That
nothing
like,
worse than being ignored, right?
well, or just like being misinterpreted.
Yeah.
Like how when I'm coming from a place of love, like how are my words not landing as love to you? You know, and it's so easy to say, well, you're not listening to me. You're not doing it right. When instead I could say, how can I say this differently? How can I approach the situation differently? Which I think is the conclusion that you're coming to as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Shannon.
and I sympathize. I did not visit my mother for 10 years because of things like that. But I think a problem that we also tend to do is if there's something that we do not like about somebody or have a stereotype about, we will one-dimensionalize that person. So they are a person of a certain political party. And they're still a mother and a brother and a father and a sister and a worker and all this, but we'll categorize. Or they're a schizophrenic instead of a human being that has schizophrenia, or they're an addict. And we will just erase all that around them because we will pinpoint on that one thing, and that's really dangerous. And I'm guilty as charged, but yeah.
Anybody else? All right. Anything else that you want to share, Karen?
In this, what happens with our amygdala, it's also true for addiction. And so I can look at somebody who I see as maybe having a heroin addiction. It's like, well, why do they keep doing that? They're not able to get to their neocortex either. And so it can be part of training for them to learn to bring up an actual urge so they can root their skills here. And I certainly have my own addictions to certain foods and certain things. So it is a way of practicing, of getting here and bringing in new skills as an option.
So that works with substance as well as behavioral addictions?
Yes. Takes lots and lots and lots of practice to set up new neural links.
Because I would venture to guess there's a lot more people that have behavioral addictions than substance addictions. And we're not even aware that we do.
Right.
So there's a difference between being a habit and being an addiction.
Right.
I'm also thinking about how much that information is helpful if you have kids in your life, right? So kids who are not fully developed yet in their brain and they're reacting and we're expecting them to respond in a certain way that they're not even equipped to do, and so to become aware of what we can do to support them.
Yes, because then we put them on timeout.
Right.
What will you do differently next time? And it's in the neocortex, and then the next time it happens again because they can't get to it, and we blame them.
Right. So it's important stuff.
Yeah.
It might sound silly, but even dogs
Even
Yeah.
dogs.
and cats, right? Like
And owners of dogs and cats.
They're just
dogs,
dogs.
right? Like my dog today went outside in the snow and was digging in the backyard and came in, and she's a white dog, and she was fully covered in mud, and I had just cleaned the house. And I lost my mind. Whatever, I'm on the board of trustees, but I will admit that. I lost my mind. I was like, are you kidding me? And I'm yelling at a dog, and I'm bathing the dog in the middle of a work day. And I was telling Shayna earlier that I think next time I will just try my hardest to just take a breath, to just center myself before I bathe the dog so angrily.
So when that memory comes up, make the feelings, lean into those feelings and make them, and make it come to a 7 or 8 out of 10. And then put in a new ending when you're in the state.
I will do this instead.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So it's, like sports teams after a game, the next day they look at the films, they stop it and say, here's the issue. What would we do differently next time? But they really try to be in the state.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, and that's just reminded me of one other thing, and that is that we need to be really patient with ourselves. I mean, we're just learning, we're learning how to do this. And so when we yell at the dog for getting dirty because he's being a dog, to beating up on ourselves in that moment isn't going to be very helpful either, right? So patience and forgiveness and all of that, self-compassion.
Is this my show?
It's your show, Christine.
A question going back to putting a different ending in there. Can you put anything positive, like a song or, start singing a song, anything that brings you happiness, going to the beach?
And what they found, I'm also a music therapist, is that music is on one side of the brain and language on the other. And so when music has both of those, it helps the two brains connect and helps us be more integrated. So it's a great idea.
Can you guys give me an example of what that would look like? Is it something you're doing in the moment? Are you stopping and trying to sing your favorite song as a way to calm yourself down? Or is it more like you're doing it after the fact when you're trying to integrate like a new,
Any of that.
and all of it?
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
Okay.
So talking kids, because we just talk kids, I mean, that works so well with kids too, right? I've got a little 4-year-old granddaughter, and like all kids, it's time to clean up. No, I'm not cleaning up, but if I start singing a song, clean up, everybody do your, I mean, she'll immediately jump up, start singing the song, and help me clean up. So music is great.
Yes.
All right, anybody else here? All right, Kate, do you have any last minute words that you might like to share?
I don't think so. I was able to get that dog incident off
Yeah.
my chest. Like, thank you for, I know it's not Ash Wednesday, this is not a Catholic church, but thanks for absolving my sins. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you for sharing. Greg?
Yeah, I just, my takeaway from my last 4 years of reading on the topic of biases in general, and this evening has only reinforced what I've learned, is that we need to be gentle with ourselves. There's so many ways that we can manifest cognitive bias, and we'll never be able to recognize them all. Some of them will be recurring over and over again. Those we should be more aware of and work towards them. But even if we are aware of them, even if we try and don't succeed, doesn't mean we should stop. Try it again. Next time will be better. And be gentle with yourself. Don't, flagellate. That's self-defeating. So be gentle, and it's a lifetime practice.
Thank you, Greg. And as you were speaking there, I was thinking about, there are people who believe that, well, these are unconscious biases. I can't help it. It's just the way I am. No. Right? We all have the ability to change. We all have the ability to grow. It is what we are here to do, is to grow and to learn and develop ourselves so that we are not limited by what our brain is doing. We can overcome those things. So I just wanted to share that last piece too. You and I can overcome our biases, and I think it's more important than ever when I see the division and the divisiveness and families not talking to each other and that sort of thing that is just so common today. So if you and I will agree to become aware and to come about this differently, then maybe we can begin to heal those things. So I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight, for your willingness to learn about cognitive biases and how you can navigate through those. I know that there are some people here that are not a part of our Unity community, so I really want to thank all of you for coming out. And also to say, if this is the sort of thing that you enjoy, if this was meaningful to you, keep checking out our website, our Facebook page, and this is an amazing spiritual community that can support you in being who you really are. And so if you're looking for spiritual community, come join us for that as well. We have services 9 and 11 every Sunday, or live stream, so you don't even have to walk through the doors. So thank you for joining us this evening. We've got this final piece that Greg is passing out on the various types of biases that there are. If you would like to support Unity Spiritual Center in bringing these kinds of activities to our center, there is a donation basket. We'd welcome any free will offering that you might like to make. And I'm sure we'll be coming up with more of these panel discussions, so just keep watching out for them and tell your friends and come join us again. Thank you so much.